With that being said, let's bring on Kyle Tyler. How you doing, Kyle?
I'm well. I'm getting going coffee cup number one. So it's a little earlier here in Texas than it is on your side of the country.
I'm bad. Thank you so much for waking up early on a Saturday and joining
No,
us.
it's my pleasure.
So, I've seen some of your stuff. The one thing that I want to say is this coal guy, this pipe bomber, supposed pipe bomber. I'm just not buying it.
Nor should you.
I'm not buying it, and there's multitude of reasons. But it's just so convenient, right? So you being an FBI investigator, um, give us your insight on why. And I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm going to assume you don't. You're not buying it.
Yeah. Well, for me, it's really easy. It's timeline. That's it. So the FBI is a competent investigative organization. I'm not a big fan of the way that it does a lot of things. I don't think that it does things politically that I think are appropriate. We actually saw a great example yesterday. We saw I think they call him the operations director now for the National Security Branch, get up in front of Congress and said that Antifa is the biggest domestic terrorism threat. And I did a big chunk of discussion about this on my podcast if people want to hear it. But essentially, this is the same organization that just a few years ago was telling you that white supremacy was the biggest domestic terrorism threat. And so they're clearly happy to pick up a political football and run it. And that should be evidence for anybody that as the regime changes, whatever's convenient to keep my job, to keep my paycheck, my pension, and so on, that's what I'm going to do. So they're not incompetent, but they are morally flexible when it comes to this is the mission. We laid out the priorities, go do it, and they'll go do it. So that's part one. Then we move into the actual timeline of the pipe bomb case. We're talking about 5 years. And in a 5-year period, the FBI came up with, and I said it sort of sarcastically to a couple of other people, but let's just be real clear about it. They came up with cell phone pings, credit card receipts, and a license plate reader that caught a vehicle. On the worst case scenario, from a dead stop in the middle of the night, and they were fast asleep and didn't know what was coming at them, that's 3 weeks worth of FBI investigative work. And it took them 5 years. So no, I don't buy that. And they even claim that they started anew and they looked at it all fresh and they gave it, and that was 6 weeks prior to the arrest. And that also doesn't hold any water because that 6 weeks was also it coordinated itself very nicely with the story released by The Blaze.
Yes.
Which was not picked up by any mainstream media outlets. It was covered by me and InfoWars and a couple of other independent types. And I won't know all the smaller outlets that picked it up. But when I saw this story march out, immediately you got reception. First of all, it was released by MSNBC and Kendallanian, which will trigger certain people's minds to think a certain way. Now, I'm not against Kendallanian. In fact, he and I have I would say a professional, cordial relationship. He and I have been texting back and forth the last couple of days about this story. Same story though. CBS, NBC, CNN, Fox News picked it up and ran it. So everybody on the majors ran the story immediately, and they didn't question it even a little bit. And that makes everybody who pays attention for the last couple of years, you should question it right away.
Well, yeah. As soon as this story broke with this coal guy, I'm like, well, wait a minute. Just a few weeks ago, there was this Capitol Police officer that supposedly was moved, a month or two after to the CIA special.
Yeah, it was about 6 months, as we understand it.
6 months. Moved, and that's a job promotion. Let's be honest.
Honestly, that actually makes it a little bit more clear for people. I don't think it's a promotion. It's a lateral at best, but I would like to do this, and we're actually gonna. I'm gonna reach out to Tom Maskey and see if he'll get the numbers. I wanted to know the number of people that moved from the Capitol Police to the CIA's Force Protection Unit in the last 10 years. I'd like to know those numbers. I bet you it's single digits. If you were gonna say that what was a more prestigious, maybe more forward-reaching, more visibility to people in power that might actually have a promotion potential, I actually think staying at Capitol Police is a better move career-wise. I mean, I don't think it's a great organization, but Carl, if you'll bear with me on this one, and this is something that I had former FBI agents tell me, and we've all kind of come to the same belief about this. It's not a place you go to promote. It's a place you move people to hide them. And the CIA has tools that are not necessarily used for people in that job. Like what she does is essentially a campus security, physical security, at the FBI, we have FBI special agents. They're your investigators. We have analysts. They do sort of analytical work. And then we had a group called FBI police. And they're not really police. They're just security guards for the building. They're federal special duty police officers for that little space. They can't carry a gun normally on any given day, only when they're on the actual premises, that kind of thing. And she went to that kind of a role. She's CIA police for the campus. That's not really a promotion compared to having visibility to Congress people and being able to, sort of writ large carry a weapon and being looked at as law enforcement of an actual police department that has 2,000 plus people in it. I think it's a hiding position. Just that's Kyle Seraphin's take on it. People can take it or leave it.
You know what? It makes a lot more sense because your average person like me, I'm just thinking, all right, well, she got a promotion, right? She did what the deep state wanted her to do. So they're like, okay, let's take you and put you here. You were a good foot soldier.
Mm-hmm.
My question is why roll out this Cole guy? Why roll him out? Why not bring her in front of Congress? Well, Congress are a bunch of weaklings, but why not bring her in and follow that lead? Why bring this essentially? What did his grandmother say? He had the mind of a 16-year-old. He wasn't that smart, right?
Yeah. And so we had whistleblowers. We had a whistleblower come forward yesterday or the day before. If people follow Tom Massey's feed, and Jim Jordan got a copy of the letter as well. It just turns out I also got a copy of the letter.
Nice.
I'm friendly with the attorney. And I recommend anybody that's in the FBI that wants to do a whistleblower activity, go to this guy, Kurt Suzdak, and he'll do his best to protect you. And so will I. Whatever platform I have, I will use to do it. But I'll scroll down a couple of bits on here. This FBI employee is quoted as being familiar with Brian Cole and observed him hundreds of times, if not more, over the course of a decade. And that there are numerous law enforcement officers that live in proximity to Mr. Cole's house, to include FBI agents, Secret Service agents and officers, and police officers. That neighborhood, interestingly enough, is a neighborhood I almost bought a house in. I almost bought a house 100 yards away from where the Cole family lives. And that would have been in 2020. So my wife and I were, because I was in Washington, D.C. for 5 years, or in the area around there. And yeah, they said that he's not sociable, that he doesn't perform activities outside the house. I'm just going to read directly from it. He walks the dog several times a day, wandering around, not performing anything else, doesn't interact with anyone, doesn't wave or acknowledge or even say hello to people. And in fact, he doesn't even look at people when he walks past them on the street. He appears to live in his own world. He's never been seen angry or agitated. This is going, like, as I understand it, like about 10 years worth of seeing this guy in your neighborhood. And you get an impression of somebody that is your neighbor. They said his demeanor is detached and vacant. And he walks around with headphones, and he doesn't seem to be interested in anything else. And he doesn't really appear to interact with the world around him. So I'm going to end quoting it there. But that's a real specific type of person to have in your neighborhood to notice. And then to see them charged with this pipe bomb thing, which we saw someone who was alert, who was cagey, that was paying attention, that took actions that looked like they interacted with a dog walker, for example. There's a great video of that. And so we see standing back and, maybe adjusting glasses timed with the movement of other people. We've seen sitting down at the park bench and looking over a shoulder and appearing to have sort of like an awareness of things going on. And that's the exact opposite of the way that Mr. Cole was described by neighbors and the grandmother.
Yeah. And none of it makes sense to me. Just the video, and I've talked about this on my podcast and my radio show here, is, what sticks into my head is that scene where it's outside of I think the DNC headquarters in DC. Mm-hmm. You've got the Secret Service there. You've got somebody walk by. They find this pipe bomb. Now, the advance team for the Secret Service didn't find this pipe bomb. Apparently, it was put there the night before. This just, they think we're stupid. I swear they think we're stupid.
Defies credulity is the phrase I like to use.
So you have I think, I could be wrong, I remember it supposedly was an off-duty Capitol police officer that walked by, spotted and that could be disinformation. I just remember them saying, walks over, talks to the Secret Service guy gets out, looks at the pipe bomb, gets back in the SUV, continues to do whatever he's doing. School kids cross the street. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris is in the building. Mm-hmm. No sense of urgency, no sense of alarm. just like everyday thing. And I remember Dan Bongino. I remember listening to his podcast and him saying, "None of this makes sense. None
It
of it
makes
makes sense."
it makes even less sense than Dan knows because we got some additional information and the video substantiates what I'm saying. And then people can go to Steve Baker's Twitter feed or X feed. They could probably find it in my own. And essentially, what happened? Your recollection at the time is correct. That's what they said. That was sort of the release story. Off duty Capitol Police officer. It's actually way worse than that. It wasn't an off duty officer. It was a plainclothes officer from what's called the counter surveillance unit. And so the bomb, for people to understand, the first bomb was discovered outside the RNC behind a dumpster between that and the Capitol Hill Club and was found at 12:43 p.m. on January the 6th. So just before 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock is roughly about when the breach happens. Might be 10 minutes before. So right corresponding with the breach, discovery of pipe bomb number 1, which incidentally was placed second. The bombs were placed DNC and then RNC, but they were found RNC and then DNC. I'm just helping people get the timeline.
Yep.
The second bomb was found because people from Capitol Police were dispatched to go look for bombs. You find a bomb. The rule in law enforcement is if you find a gun on someone, look for more.
Yeah.
If you find a bomb, I guess you look for more. And so
Sure.
they went out looking like, good God, do we have other explosives device in the capital region in and around this complex that we should be looking for? So they dispatched apparently 3 counter surveillance teams. Each team had 2 officers. And a 2-man officer counter surveillance team found bomb number 2 at about 1:05. And that's pretty quick. Like that's what,
Yeah.
22 minutes? But it's worse than that because the team that was moving to go find bomb number 2 was already in motion before the radio call went out to go look for bombs. And they were already moving lights and sirens towards the Capitol South Metro Station where the 2 officers parked. And then those men got out of their chairs or out of their vehicle. And they went directly to the only bush that the pipe bomber in the hood from the night before had been sitting at on the ground for 77 seconds outside of the Congressional Black Caucus Institute. And it's within a few moments of, it's just a few hundred yards away from where the actual bomb was found. But the pipe bomber the night before had dallied at this bush, sat down cross-legged, reached into a backpack. Video footage exists. It's grainy and garbage, but it's there. And reached underneath this bush and appeared to place something and then maybe retrieve the same thing out from underneath it. And so those Capitol Police officers, and the video shows it, they go walking directly to that bush without stopping anywhere else. And that's very incriminating. And then they look under the bush when they walk past it. And then they stop, and you can imagine them having some sort of a conversation going like, hey, man, I thought it was supposed to be here. Like, where's the bomb? Yeah. And then they go and they do a second look. They double back and they look under it again, this time with a much more pronounced hip bend, all the way looking head, cocked underneath. Oh, is there anything under here? No, there's not. Then they go directly to the bench and they find the bomb. And it took them 11 minutes and 7 seconds from the time they left their seats in the car to find the second bomb. And then they stopped looking for bombs altogether. They're done. Now, look, I did investigative work and I did it in the same place that these guys worked. If you told me we were going to go look for pipe bombs and it took me less than 12 minutes to go find another bomb, I might think the place is lousy with them. So I'm going to start assuming that. And they did exactly what you said. They told a DC Metro PD guy and a Secret Service agent or officer, we just found another bomb. The device is over here. And those guys finished their sandwiches. And as you said, children cross the streets, a bus full of nuns go by, whatever. Like the world didn't stop. The metro train kept running. Nobody set up what's called a minimum safe distance to be able to start doing a bomb, a bomb dismantlement. And for whatever reason, they also, I think as I understand it, they actually took apart that bomb with a robot in the street there in the middle of Washington, D.C. They dismantled it there, which is also not what you do when you have a pipe bomb. Now, look, I'm not an expert on explosives.
Yeah.
But I spent about 100 hours training in demo when I was in the military. So I have some experience with explosives. I've used C4 and det cord, and I've used, high and low order explosives. And when you have something that the FBI considers their primary threat, which are pipe bombs, that's your major IED that you're going to find. You're not going to find someone has access to dynamite commercial.
Yeah.
That's just not very common. So the Bureau actually has, and so does the ATF, and probably does every law enforcement agency, if I had to guess, they have a render safe pipe bomb mission subset where they really focus in on these things. And, like all other contracts, there's a very significant amount of money that is spent on the cool toys and gadgets, the robots and so on.
Yeah.
They make devices that actually contain pipe bombs.
Yeah.
And the whole point of it is that you can take a robot, it'll go and pick up the pipe bomb, it'll throw it into this containment device, and if that thing were to go off in the area, it destroys. It's sacrificial to the
Yeah.
device, but it's not going to cause anything else. And it's
It
because it's a low
contains.
order explosive. It's not a high order that will be. Your C4 would
Yeah.
probably demo that, but a low order is not going to do that. It doesn't have enough energy. And they did that with one, but not with the other bomb. For some reason, they detonated it in the street.
Hmm. Well, hey, man, nothing to see here. Well, and I
That's
want
it.
everybody to think about this. If you've ever lived in an area where they've called in a like a kid once out of a test and they call the school and they call in a bomb.
Mhm.
It happens here quite a lot. Believe it or not, here in Allentown, Pennsylvania, it happens. It's happened like 3 times in the past year. They
Oh, I believe it.
evacuate the school immediately and lock it down.
Yeah. Abundance of caution is almost always words you hear,
They
right?
don't.
They just shut
Yes.
everybody out. It's like get everybody away. You don't know how powerful. You assume the
Yes.
worst, and then you bring it back. Because what does it cost to miss a couple of minutes of class? Nothing.
But yet you have the elected vice president in the building, school kids, and this is why it's like I have people say to me, like this is conspiracy theory. Why would they hide? Why would they? Why would Cash Patel? And by the way, I'll be honest. I love President Trump. I
Mhm.
absolutely love him. I am not a fan of Pam Bondi. I have not been a fan of Pam Bondi from the beginning, and I've caught a lot of crap for it. But what I can tell everybody is look at Letitia James, look at James Comey, look at Adam Schiff, right? Look at what happened with Lindsay Holligan, right? She was actually there. Do you think that was by accident that they waited so long to appoint her so that a judge could throw it out? You see, they want to make you think that they're doing something, but really they're just slow walking because they don't want to put forth President Trump's agenda because the Republican Party in itself, and again, I'll just go back to Indiana, look at it. They're not afraid of President Trump. They're not afraid of you and me, we the people. They're afraid of the deep state and they're afraid of the Communist Democrat Party. That's who they're afraid of. It shouldn't be that way. But we've allowed it to be that way, to be honest with you. We have. We've surrendered our country to these psychopaths. And, it's time we start waking up. And like I said from the beginning, this isn't the safe place MAGA radio show. I want to fix problems. I want to get to the root of this. I want to be the alarm for President Trump to say, "Hey, man, you need to take a deeper look, brother. I know you're distracted right now
Mm.
with Ukraine and Israel, but man, you got a fire burning underneath you, brother. And if we don't correct this and win these midterms, baby, you're impeached, and the country's gone."
Yeah, I do think that's probably the most probable scenario still, and I think that's self-induced. But the issue is that you put people in that sounded good, talked a good game, didn't have the technical knowledge. I actually heard I heard Patrick Burns, who I've got mixed feelings on. As a man, he's very nice, and
Yeah.
I've talked to him maybe once or twice personally, and no complaints about that. His analysis on slapping a infantry officer from the Marine Corps, retired Marine Corps infantry officer, to every single like administrative level functional manager in the bureau or in the DOJ or in the DHS is actually not a terrible idea. He just said, look, you've got people that don't know how to do the do part of it. Which is ironic considering that Dan Bongino is the do part of the FBI. I think a lot of people don't understand the agencies that they're critiquing oftentimes, and so I've got a narrow window into one of them, and I've spent a lot of time over the last several years since they tried to destroy my life to really understand what the problem is. And if people think that the FBI director runs the FBI, they're sorely mistaken. That's obvious to anybody who works in the FBI. The FBI director is like a figurehead, kind of like a president. They
Yeah.
give marching orders, they give vision, they give direction, they give sort of inspirational speeches, they kiss the babies, and they high five the staff and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of what they do. And so whether Kash Patel is there or whether anybody else is there is kind of irrelevant. It doesn't matter if even Chris Wray can do it. What matters is who the deputy director is. And Dan
Yeah.
Bongino is not a good person to do that. He's actually horrific, and it's not his own fault for whatever it's worth. I think he was put in an unwinnable war, but you don't go into that space because his job is to execute. You have to know the animal that you're working with. He's the XO. He's the he's the person that has to have institutional knowledge. And he doesn't. He doesn't know who knows who and who's been working with who and who he can trust and who he can't trust. And, I've gotten some messages from folks that he's out there trying to do what's called a mole hunt. So he's out there, leaking certain information to certain groups to see where the leaks are. You can't find that in the FBI. You can't find that in any organization with the way that rumors run around. You really can't trace it unless you know who to trust. And you can really do, these 5 people are going to run my op and they're going to seed certain information to certain groups. And then we see where it pops out. But he didn't have that. And so, these agencies continue to run as they always have. And to say this FBI or that FBI, and I'm sure it's true for all the other agencies as well, whether it be Commerce or Department of Energy, the people that are working there are 95, 98, maybe 99% the same as they were the last administration. So if you didn't come in with two attitudes, and I refer to it as a beach landing really early on, like a military conquest, where you put boots on ground and you take physical territory. That needed to be done. And it's also like a hostile takeover when you come into a new, into a business where you're going to have to set new goals, new culture, new expectations. You're going to have to let the people that want to perform know that they're going to be safe and they're going to be protected and they have an opportunity to thrive. And you've got to let the people that are against your agenda understand that they're done and they're out and their time is over. And that's a really hard thing to do. And I mean, there are people that specialize in hostile takeovers of businesses to try to do turnarounds. And we didn't bring in a turnaround specialist. And we didn't bring in people that knew how to do that in most of these agencies. We brought in pretty faces from Fox News. I would say the exception is Pete Hegseth, who was kind of a pretty face from Fox News that seems like he knows what the warfighter wants. And so you're getting a lot more buy-in from the ground level. If the top and the bottom both are on board, you can squeeze the middle, especially if the middle doesn't have a lot of power, or especially if the middle knows that they're on the ropes and they have to keep their business to themselves. But that's not the case in the FBI. They kept all of the worst middle level and upper level management. And even for all the people they fired, every single person that is a senior manager in the FBI right now was promoted there by Chris Wray's FBI, which was a thing. But that's really to say that they were promoted by Paul Abate, who was the deputy director at that time. And that's what people don't really get, I think.
I forget what show it was, but it was maybe a day or two ago. Kash Patel was asked point blank, did you fire all the people that were involved in Russiagate and so forth and so on?
Mm-hmm.
He said they were taken out of leadership positions.
Yeah, they weren't. I mean, that's why he keeps going back and adding more people to that list.
He didn't say fired. He said taking out of a leadership. That means they're still there. They're still there. 1 minute, Kyle. Let me just hit a couple of our ads here. All right, Kyle, thank you so much for sitting through that. That's how we pay the bills around here.
That's how it works. I'll tell you something else too. So in addition to this guy not looking like a good subject, and I want to hone in on the real issue with it. 3 weeks, like I said, that would be a dead stop, and we've kind of meandered around it. But 3 weeks would be a dead stop. The FBI comes in with no background knowledge, and they go and they get a guy. They put us outside of a door in 1 week. They found people on security cam footage that were acting squirrely. That turns out that door that we were next door, and look, if people don't pay attention to this story, I was talking to my neighbors last night, and they were like, there's so many twists and turns. It's like, well, yeah, it's a full-time job to pay attention just to one story. That's why one reporter will run down a single story, or a case agent will just focus in on it. So the FBI put me and my surveillance team. I used to work out of the Washington field office, and I did physical surveillance in the field for a living for 3 years straight. And then I moved on to another job. And while we were there, towards the end of my tenure, we're sitting outside watching this person that was referred to in the report released by Barry Loudermilk as a person of interest 3. That person was not alleged to have done anything wrong on that day, but seemed to be connected to another person of interest 2, who took pictures of the dumpster outside the RNC where the bomb was found, who wandered around suspiciously, who did a costume change coming out of the metro station, went from a red hat to a Elmer Fudd hat and some sunglasses and a mask and some other kind of weird things that made the FBI key in on them. And so 7 days after January 6th, we're sitting outside looking at this residence, trying to establish what we call pattern of life and see who this guy is. Now, he was a Air Force civilian employee, a retired Air Force enlisted guy. And so we're keeping an eye on this. And then we got pulled 2 days later. And I made a suggestion 2 days into the surveillance, having not seen the guy come out of the door at all. And that's not uncommon. Sometimes you just don't see anything. We usually call it a dry hole. But we believed he was there. His vehicle was there. And so I said, well, why don't you let me do a knock and talk, which was not normal for FBI surveillance teams, but it wouldn't have been out of the range for ours. Ours was kind of a special unit. We had translators. We had, 2 Spanish speakers and an Arabic speaker. We had a tactical sort of component. And so I said, look, I was in the Air Force. I'm a civilian employee of a government agency. We got enough in common. Why don't you let me go knock on the door of this guy and have a conversation and see if I can't say, hey, let's not get anybody hurt. Maybe you're involved in something you didn't know, or maybe your house guest is involved in something you didn't know.
Yeah.
And that immediately resulted in us being pulled back into the office, which was suspicious at the time. And then almost 5 years later, the Blaze releases the person that they've identified, this gal from the CIA now, and she was a Capitol police officer at the time, and she lived directly next door in what's called a row house, which is like a it's like a condo building for
Yeah.
most people to understand. And people on the other side of the world don't necessarily know if you're watching on X, but these doors are 8 feet apart. And so if you open one door, you almost hit the other door when it's fully open. They shared a roof. And so to end up at the same endpoint, there's 2.4 million households in the greater Washington, D.C. area. To find two at random that are right next door to each other is 1 in 5.7 trillion. So that's pretty unusual to be able to end up in that space.
It's really unusual. My question to you, Kyle, is did the FBI reach back out to you after the administration took over and offer you your job back?
No, but I was actually talking to Kash Patel, and I have talked to Kash Patel off and on through the time right up until he was confirmed, and then he stopped speaking to me. And that was kind of a red flag for me. He and I had a conversation probably the day before he went into his confirmation, maybe the day he was going into the confirmation hearing. And I told him point blank, I don't want to work for the FBI again. This is far better. I mean, it may be Saturday morning for me, and this is theoretically a day off. But at the end of the day, I like doing this more than working for a government that I don't like. I don't like government at all. Like I'm not in the Trump camp like you are, only because Trump is not hard right enough. And if he said that, we should take out 50% of the government, I think we should take out 80% of the government, and I would have way, way less. And I want to see what the states can do, and I'd rather see what communities can do in faith communities. So I don't want government at all. I'm like, get rid of most of it. But I don't want to go back and work there again. But I did say that if there was something that you thought only I could do, which is illogical, there's other people who could, I would come in, but I don't want to. I hate Washington, D.C. I took a post in Las Cruces, New Mexico, which people didn't even know was in America. And I moved out of the D.C. area specifically to go there because I want nothing to do with government, and I don't want to work for it again. Again, I guess I would have served at that point, but not anymore. I mean, now I look at it and I just go, this is a mess. My buddies who work in there, and I still have good FBI friends, they think it's a mess. So all I ever asked, I actually did ask, I made an ask of Kash Patel, and I said, would you please settle the lawsuit that I have? We're suing, me and 21 other FBI employees are suing the FBI over their COVID policies. And we're suing them for the exact reason that Patel fired the guy who did the thing that we're suing them for. There was a guy named Spencer Evans. He was the one in charge of COVID policy. He got fired for his overarching and aggressive enforcement of COVID. And we're suing him for that. And the FBI is fighting us tooth and nail in the lawsuit. We've been at it for over 2.5, maybe 3 years now, including the entire time that Trump's been in. And the DOJ went to a settlement meeting with us. They laughed and they walked out. They offered everybody in the bureau that had a negative interaction, I think they offered them $800. And like they took my career, they took my pension, they took my medical benefits for life. They took all the things that I was working towards, and they kicked me out. And they did so because I, essentially said no to COVID, and I was a whistleblower about some of the things people have heard about, whether it be parents at school board meetings or investigating Catholics, which is pretty close to my heart as a Catholic when they were doing that in Richmond. So, we exposed some things, and this administration has not shown up in good faith to do the things you would hope. And so behind the scenes, if people are cheerleaders by default, and I'm not mad at anybody for, kind of picking quote unquote our team, I just see more of it, even in this narrow focus that I have, that are not winners. And to go out there and find not a CIA gal who, by the way, fits all the pattern that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel talked about. This is the biggest thing that has to be discussed. These guys said it was an inside job. They said that they were people in the government who were involved in it. They mentioned that all of these sort of connections between law enforcement and illogical prosecution and looking the other way and people in certain roles not acting in the way that you'd expect them to do. I'm like, yeah, well, I get that. And then you went and found me a guy who's autistic. He's into My Little Pony. He's got apparently the mind of a 16-year-old. He's pretty simple. He's disaffected, disattached. And he was buying bomb parts. And this is the other crazy thing. We didn't bring it up earlier, but he was buying bomb parts 2 years before the election because he was mad about the election in advance because he's a prophet. I mean, and then where did that come from?
Yeah. I mean, look, you're you were in the FBI. To me, if there's somebody out there buying bomb parts, and again, we'll go back, take it to the Patriot Act, right? It was all supposed to make us safe, right? From domestic terrorism, right? Anytime the government says they're doing something to protect you, it's just to take more rights away from you. Let's be honest.
It is.
And that's what the Patriot Act was about. And that's what COVID was about. And
Every one of those transactions is a you give me safety and we're going to take some freedom and liberty for you to move around.
yeah,
So
yeah,
your choices are always the same. And then, it's dangerous freedom, or do you want the tyrannical safety? And COVID offered full tyranny. A lot of people
yeah,
saw that, and a lot of people woke up to it. But the Patriot Act was a creeping, cancerous sort of rot against Americans being responsible for their own safety, including accepting a certain amount of danger. About the bomb parts, for people to understand too, the things they alleged him to have. The first thing he apparently bought was in 2019, and they were 5 connectors from a micro system or a micro center, which is like a glorified Radio Shack, and they were 9-volt battery connectors with red and black wires. He bought 14 gauge red and black wires. I just want men that are listening to this to think about what's in their garage right now, because you too are a bomb maker. You didn't know it. Some 1-inch galvanized pipe, with threads on either side, some end caps for galvanized pipe. I mean, these are not wild things. Wire strippers, a machinist file. I have all these things in my garage right now. I went and found the end caps the other day just because I was curious. I've got, 1-inch and an 8-inch pipe, and I have all these kind of things. And a lot of people use pipe bombs. They do bigger pipe than 1-inch. It's actually pretty small for a pipe bomb. He had kitchen timers. That might be a little bit different for most men, but I guarantee some
I,
women that are listening have some
listen, I
kitchen
have kitchen
timers.
timers downstairs in my kitchen.
That's right. And
Like,
people have them in their workout rooms, and they have them for a lot of different reasons, and they don't just have to do with, doing an egg boil. So the things that he had are household items, and they were spaced out over a period of about 16 months. And you're telling me essentially that a guy who has low functionality and is a super mastermind that was able to evade the FBI for 5 years, because this is the claim, he did so by being an autistic My Little Pony fan who has a disaffected interest in the world, and he spaced out these super criminal purchases with his own credit card, because that's how they found them. And he went and did the crime in his own vehicle with his own license plate on the back of it. And then he also carried his own cell phone, because he's never seen a single thing in the spy world. And he's never seen like a single, spy movie where they put the phone in a bag. I don't know. It does, like, none of that rings true to me. And I don't think it does to anybody else.
no, because think about it. Everybody knows, like, that if you've ever watched, like, any crime show, right, on ID, right, you know that they can find you from pinging your cell phone, right? So why would you have that with you, right? If and just like you laid it out, right? This guy's a mastermind. He's building pipe bombs. He's evading the FBI, but yet he forgets the simplest things, right? Like, yeah, leave your cell phone at home, maybe, right?
It's so easy. I have a sponsor that's a Faraday company, and so I put my phone in a Faraday bag when I
There
don't want
you
it to be
go.
bothered, and that shuts it off. By the way, I did the same thing when I was in the FBI. If you don't have a Faraday bag, you can wrap it up in tinfoil and throw it in a metal box, and it'll do the same thing. You want to shut down your phone? That's how you do things. So how did that go down? And then, what's crazy is in the affidavit that we only have one piece of paper from the FBI. It's a complaint, which means the agent wrote up an affidavit of truth, and this is the establishment of probable cause, and swears it out in front of a judge. It's really thin. That's my word for it, but that's what I think. And they mentioned that it's a homemade bomb. They mention that it has homemade black powder in it. And then they describe all the components of the bomb, which is the casing and the triggering mechanism, essentially, that he has the wiring and so on. What they failed to mention in this particular complaint is, where's the bomb part of the bomb? They say nothing about the homemade black powder, which is not something that people just randomly have in their house. I actually don't have charcoal and saltpeter and sulfur and ammonium nitrate or whatever else needs to go in there to make the bomb part of it. So
No.
they lift that part out. And so that's really interesting. And it's a conspicuous absence in this particular document.
Hmm. So my question, and I'm not asking you to be Nostradamus here, but does this blow up in the FBI's face? And if it does, what's the fallout?
I think the fallout is discrediting of the people at the top there. They just did a 5-person, Janine Pirro, Dan Bongino, Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and Darren Cox, who's in charge of the Washington field office. They did this big press conference, and they celebrated, and they all high-fived and yucked it up, and no particular details. Mainstream media outlets have reached out to me and said, we sat in that press conference, and it sounded not like it made any sense. And so, yeah, I think it does blow up on them, figuratively speaking. I think it does fall apart. And part of it is because I've been working on this, as have others, for the last 5 years. This is not something that we just let go. The story is it's too tied to the tragedy of a lot of people in America's lives. There are people whose lives were wrecked and their sentencings were incredibly aggressive based on citing pipe bombs and terroristic threats to the Capitol at that time.
Yeah.
And so for you to go, well, it was just some lone wolf, black guy living in Woodbridge, Virginia, who just wanders around, doesn't bother anybody, but he also predicted the election would go the wrong way years earlier, and then he would go drop these bombs. That no further information. That's good enough for us. That doesn't fly. And I'll just tell you, I've got exculpatory evidence right now on my computer, and I've shared it with his mother. I let her know that we have it, and I've reached out to the legal team. And so between me and Steve Baker and the folks at the Blaze and another couple of people that are working as investigators online, and I hate that term, by the way, the internet sleuths or whatever,
Yeah.
but there are certain people that have taken a serious interest in this when it comes to the number of cameras that have been released publicly. And we have video that I think actually is enough to get an acquittal in a DC jury based on having worked in DC for 5 years. I think you can get a DC attorney to acquit him if they went to trial this morning and I presented something to them that I've got. So I don't think it goes anywhere. I don't think it works well. And I think these people are they're either going to get full blowback or some people are going to have to fall on swords. I don't know how you survive this as an administration in that little DOJ circle. How do you do that if you brought this charge and you were wrong?
Why would they? I guess my question is, and I kind of alluded, but why would they do this? Why would they take a kid, right? Autistic. Obviously, he's autistic. He sounds autistic to me. Headphones, isolated, just a My Little Pony bro.
Brony. Yeah, the brony.
Brony.
It's a real thing.
I know it is. It's scary.
It's a weird.
We live in a very scary world.
Yeah, what a time to be alive, right?
But you know what, Kyle? God put us here for a reason, right?
That's right.
He put us here to fight. He put us here to fight, and it's going to make people uncomfortable. It is, and it's good to be uncomfortable. It's good because you know what? It lets you know you're alive and awake, and you need to be part of the fight. And why do this? Why take this kid? I had somebody ask me this. Do you really think that Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi would take an innocent person and persecute them and accuse them of a crime they didn't do? And my response is, do you remember J6? They shot an innocent woman, Ashley Babbitt. They shot her dead. Roseanne Boylan was beaten. So when you ask me that, that's my response. But in your opinion, why?
There's a couple of maybe plausible explanations. First of all, it's an unanswerable question with what we have right now. We can't impugn the motives of somebody else's heart. So we just have to speculate. And I know Tom Massey went out and talked about this with Matt Kibbe on a Blaze episode yesterday. That was actually really good. So if people haven't seen that, you can send 10 minutes and get the highlights of it. It's worth your time. There's a couple of possibilities. Number one is that this is the entrenched FBI. I don't like using deep state as much, even though it's kind of convenient because people think it's something sexy and it's just administrative. Yeah. But the people that are entrenched in the Bureau that have been there for a long time, if you were going to set somebody up, I mean, there's nothing more discrediting than taking the one of three cases. Bongino came in, Patel came in. They said they had three priorities. I don't know why they were these cases, but they were. They said cocaine in the White House. They were going to find out who did it. Nothing on that. They were going to find out who leaked the Dobbs decision. Not even sure that's a federal crime, but whatever. They're going to find that. And the J6 pipe bomber was the big outstanding case that really impacted, I think, the Trump administration because of what it did for Trump supporters.
Sure.
And so if you screw up one of those big three, and the only one of those three that you're going to answer the question of, you're in a really bad spot. And so obviously it's discrediting and it is potentially a career, fatality. But how do you set that up is another question. And so is it, we saw evidence and we believe it's good? This is my ongoing speculation. And Thomas Massey spoke about this and gave me credit yesterday so people can find that on my X feed. I was listening to it and I would go, oh yeah, he's really got it. And then I turned off the clip and then I came back to it and at 2 minutes and 10 seconds, he's like, maybe like a Kyle Seraphin thinks. And I'm like, nothing like seeing Congress people knowing what I think. And this is what I think. I think the FBI is too competent of an investigative agency to have failed this completely. I don't believe it. That's based on 6 years of working for them, having found people in, completely illogical things. My team was very good at accidentally finding people with almost no information. We were lucky because we were good. And so we got to believe that there's a real possibility the FBI found this guy. They had 186 cell phone pings that were in the general vicinity of the pipe bomber at the time the bombs were being dropped. The critical time for that was 7:34 p.m. to 8:18 p.m. on January the 5th, 2021. And so in that time frame, while the pipe bomber's on foot, the hoodie video we've all seen, they identified 186 phone numbers that had been pinging in generally the area. And then they started crossing them out for various reasons. 38 of them, I want to say, needed to be interviewed right away because they were highly suspicious. About 91 or 90 something of them, maybe it was 98, needed to be followed up on with some additional information. And then they excluded 51 of them right away because they were in law enforcement. That should also trouble people.
Yes.
This is coming from congressional investigators who are following up on the FBI. I would guess that Brian Cole Jr.'s information, and in fact, we're led to believe, based on what Patel and Bongino said, no new stuff, he would have been in that pool of 186. I think that's the most plausible explanation. And my guess is that at some point in time, through normal due diligence, they cleared him. They found what Massey called a rock-solid alibi, or they found things that would be, generally speaking, just called exculpatory evidence that you would not be able to pursue him. And they moved on. I bet you there's that file. It's inside the FBI's file servers. That would be my professional assessment of it. I think it would be very difficult to imagine that they found someone that pinged, generally speaking, in the area. There's problems with the pings, by the way, but that's another story. If they found someone in the area and they didn't run that lead down in 2021, I would say that by April or May at the latest, he would have been cleared. If they had identified him as a potential subject, he could have been cleared within a couple of days of finding this stuff based on what our guys have done. So that's my assessment. And so then you got to ask, how the heck did they pitch it to Dan? Well, you take in all new guys, which is what they said they did. They put new eyeballs on it, and they maybe didn't have access to the entirety of the files. If they really created the volume of 6,000 interviews and all this other stuff, and most importantly, if they were in a rush. And so what we're led to believe, this is what people have told me, people who have sources at DOJ, some people in the intelligence community, to include all the different agencies, there was this huge stir when the Capitol police officer who ended up at the CIA was named. And it's why mainstream media did not go with it, because, they've got hooks into the IC, the intelligence community has hooks into the media.
Yeah.
And they went out and they were like, you cannot touch this. This will destroy us. And so that's what we were hearing in the background, that this caused like a kick of the hornet's nest. And so if you believe, and I do, that our intelligence community is deeply embedded with our media apparatus, that is deeply embedded with our deep state government type people. And so policymakers, the action end of it on the intelligence community and the administration, and then you also have the media as sort of their mouthpiece. If you believe these sort of things, it should not be surprising to people that if you were going to go expose the dark underbelly of something like this, where you have a multi-agency cover-up, which, by the way, is what Bongino used to say, the agencies involved are the United States Capitol Police as maybe the dropper or the placement. The ATF seems to have a role in it, potentially in the cover-up and maybe even in the sourcing of the materials. I'm just speculating here. So this is Kyle's opinion of what it would involve.
Sure.
The CIA in the cover-up end of it, being able to launder somebody away and potentially, kind of helping the OPSEC end of it. And then lastly, the FBI in the final kind of mop-up and cover-up of it. And then obviously there's some component of Congress, because the United States Capitol Police answers to Congress, specifically the Speaker of the House and the Senate Majority Leader. So if you have these entities in play, you don't need a broad conspiracy of hundreds of people. You need 6 or 8 that are in there, those and well placed. And you need a couple of sacrificial foot soldiers. You need a couple of people that can pull some strings, somebody that makes a phone call and now you got a job somewhere else. And then you got to promote people from within. And what we saw is exactly that. We saw somebody from ATF that was on the bomb squad on that day promoted into a very senior position at Capitol Police. We saw somebody from a member of Congress's staff promoted to a very senior role in the FBI. And by the way, the guy who found the bomb that I told you about that went to that bush and then found the pipe bomb, he ended up as the Capitol Police liaison to the FBI. He's the controller of the conduit between Capitol Police and FBI. The person that used to work for Tom Massey that worked the pipe bomb is now the assistant director of congressional affairs at the FBI. So that's the channel that goes between Congress and the FBI. And then the ATF guy ends up at the top position. He took over for Yogananda Pittman. And so that was the on-scene commander for the bomb squad there. And so he resigned the day after Steve Baker exposed that this Bush scenario happened. And so when you start seeing people, one, resign, two, they're exposed, and three, you got a tight knit little group of people that's a half dozen. You can keep a conspiracy of 6. You can't keep a conspiracy of 100. But if everybody that's inside that role really has a vested interest in maintaining this, and they got awards, they got promotions, they all got better positions, they've got prestige, that looks like a payoff job to me. So how you sign on to do that, it's either blackmail or you don't know enough people, don't know enough information to say otherwise. And let's be real clear. Every single time, I hate, by the way, when people say that. Let's be clear. I'm always like, "That's your tell. You're about to lie." When somebody goes into the FBI and they say over and over again, and I've seen Bongino, Patel, I've seen Bondi say it. They've said, "I've been briefed on these files." If you don't go in and read them yourself, you're taking somebody's word on it that you used to say was not trustworthy.
Yep.
And I want people to listen for the real linguistic problems here. They even said when they went out on Sean Hannity's television show, "We're pretty comfortable we've got our guy. We think you're going to be pretty comfortable." That's distancing language. That's setting up for a possibility that we didn't get it right because you know that what you did was not enough to get it done. And that's Kyle Seraphin's assessment, linguistics, having listened to people for many years.
No, I mean, do you remember the interview where Dan and Cash were with Maria Bartiromo?
Of course.
And the one thing that always stuck in my head is, the FBI we don't prosecute people. It's the DOJ. It's almost like, I know that's a fact, but
Right.
it's almost like saying, "Hey, don't hold us responsible for nobody
it's
being
a hand
held
in a
accountable."
glove. That is
the buck.
hand in glove. The FBI is the hand. The glove that actually touches people is the DOJ, but it's the FBI's investigation. You know what I remember from that interview, which I think a lot of people will also reflect back on. I did an impression the other day. It goes like this: "He killed himself. I've seen the files.
Yeah, he didn't kill himself.
He killed himself." You know what I mean? And so here's the thing. Forget the words and forget what he's talking about, the subject matter. What I saw was a complete differential in energy change. You and I are having a natural interaction right here. There's laughs, there's serious moments, there's high energy, there's lower energy that is more, sort of analytical. But at the end of the day, we're speaking in a way that's extemporaneous and it's believable to people because it's the things that we're thinking at the moment we're saying it. And then there's people who've been coached to their lines. And when somebody goes from doing a podcast where we have literally thousands of hours of knowing how you sound and what kind of energy level you bring to your analysis and how you communicate, and then we see you sitting very differently and it looks like someone's holding a gun off screen and telling you what to say, and you say it like somebody is, if you screw it up and you don't get the right words, it's going to end your life. That's what it looked like to me. And I think a lot of Americans picked up on that as well. And it continues on. He's gotten a little bit more natural, but I don't think Dan Bongino feels very good about what he's doing. And that's as someone who talked to Dan. I was on his Fox show probably a half dozen times. I was on his radio show a dozen or more. And, we don't speak anymore. But at the end of the day, like I can analyze the way that I saw the guy and heard the guy and interacted with the guy. And this is not the guy that I interacted with. And I think a lot of Americans who listen to him will see the same thing.
I see it. I see it. Real quick, let's hit our last two advertisers. All right, Kyle, we're coming to the end of the program. Real quick, let everybody know where they can find you on X and on your podcast.
Sure. The podcast is real easy to find on Spotify if you're so inclined. It's Kyle Seraphin Show, Seraphin. So go check it out there if you guys want to see us on Spotify and give us a little follow. And then the same thing on X. If you want to mix it up there, I've got a pretty good following and it's at Kyle Seraphin. So I don't mix it up too much. Very easy to find.
Awesome. Thank you so much for getting up early. Love to have you back. We're actually going to be switching in the new year to the 8:00 hour. So love to have you back again. Everybody check out Kyle. He's got a lot of great insight, information. Listen, you don't have to agree with everybody, but information is the key to life, right? You got to be open-minded.
Thanks, Carl.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kyle.